If you've never heard of Doctor and you've missed our previous series, he's a psychiatrist in private practice. But what's great about his mission in life, he's got a passion for mental health promotion. And today, we're turning things up. We're talking about NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder. I had to go and find the disorder because all I said to the team and I was, we're talking about narcissism. Are we addressing it correctly? Do we say we speak about narcissism? Or do we refer to it as NPD?
So we can refer to them both narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. It just varies in terms of how severe it is. So everyone's got personalities. Everyone's got a way of thinking, feeling, dealing with problems. And everyone does have some elements of narcissism. It's just that it's not fixed. It's not intractable. And it changes depending on the environment and situation that you find yourself in. And it is definitely not a mental health disorder. Narcissism isn't. But if we speak about narcissistic personality disorder, as the term implies, there it means that during the course of the development of that personality, something happened that led to a disorder. And when we speak about a disorder, it's a mental health disorder. It is fixed. It doesn't change. Regardless of the environment or situation the person finds themselves in, it remains the same. And most importantly, it causes clinically significant distress, either for the patient, him or herself, or the family, or schoolmates or workmates.
A disorder is treatable.
Disorders can be controlled, not necessarily treatable. Unfortunately, there's no magic tablet that we can give to a person with NPD and we say, take this tablet and you're cured. It's usually quite a long journey that involves two things. The first prize definitely is therapy or psychotherapy or talk therapy. And that's absolutely essential because it is in talking to the psychologist where unhealthy ways of thinking come to the fore, and the therapist is able to call those out and to help the person to try to replace those. A significant, really essential part of doing therapy is that the patient must see that A, there's a problem, and that B, they need to work on it. That is going to make the therapeutic process a bit better. It's going to make it successful. In terms of medication, there's no single tablet that we can give to these patients. But if they do have certain complications like, say, anxiety or depression, then we may give medication for those.
You deal with a lot of personalities, humans in your practice, and with a lot of disorders. So if we talk about personality disorders, today we're just talking about narcissism. Where does narcissism fit into all the other disorders? How many are there?
So we have narcissistic personality disorder that forms part of what's called cluster B. In total, we've got 3 clusters of personality disorders or 3 families of personality disorders. So cluster A, those are your odd, eccentric people. Then you have cluster B, which is where narcissistic personality falls in. And those ones have got erratic behavior or irrational behavior. Then you got your cluster C, where they will have these weird, strange, wonderful beliefs. That's how we can largely break them down.
Right.
Cluster B is the one that tends to be more prevalent in society. And those are sitting at about 1 to 2%.
We are taught that we are, in society, need to empathize with people with disorder, that we need to practice understanding and work towards understanding if we don't have it right now. Why, when someone practices narcissistic traits, or even if they have the disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, why are they rejected? And why is it a big area of concern to the point, and I say this with a lot of sensitivity, my ex-husband is so we will label, and therefore person is rejected.
The reason it attracts such negative attention, if I may call it that, is simply because the person with NPD doesn't follow societal norms, as it were. So this person believes that they are special. They believe that they are superior, even though they don't have anything to show for it. They are preoccupied with these fantasies of unlimited success or beauty or ideal love, as it were. They are convinced that they're unique and that they should only associate with high status or special people. Interpersonally, or their relationships with their families or friends or colleagues, they'll manipulate them and they'll take advantage of them in order to gain something. They are arrogant. They display really, really arrogant attitudes. And they've got this really excessive need for admiration. And lastly, they believe that people are envious of them because of these talents that they have. And that places them at odds with what society expects a person to display.
So you just outright explain the traits of the narcissist.
Yes. So we can think of narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder as being on a spectrum. Narcissism is part and parcel of anyone's personality. We all have this to a certain extent, but we know when to switch it on. We know when to switch it off. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the NPD or the personality disorder. That one can't switch it off, regardless of where they are. And that causes problems for them at home, at work, in school. With narcissism, like I mentioned, they can realize that now I'm in the presence of the CEO, I need to tone it down. The narcissistic personality disorder will say, I'm in the presence of a CEO, I am now with my peer. And that causes problems. That's the difference in a nutshell.
It's a very good explanation because online there's so much. Like you Google something, and leading up to today, I listened to a few podcasts, and it choked me up. It was just too overwhelming. I looked at this and I thought to myself, am I one? Immediately you start thinking, am I following any of this because I don't want to be rejected by society, and you don't want to appear unfair, in life. What causes NPD? And now I'm also going to ask, what causes narcissistic behavior, like just generally, Why do we switch it on? Why do I want to adopt the traits of a narcissist in any conversation or relationship?
So I think that's a beautiful question. Let's start with the NPD first. So with NPD, we see it coming to the fore in our teens and in the early 20s. That's when you begin to see those features. And it is experiences that have happened to the kiddie during their formative years, which is what childhood is, where then we can say the seeds of developing NPD are planted. So if there's abuse there, if there's trauma there, if there's inconsistent parenting, if there's what's called closeted parenting, where the parent shields the child from consequences of their actions or overly praises the child even when it doesn't have to be done, that plants the seeds for NPD. We do know that there's this complex interaction between the internal environment of the person or genes as well as the external environment. So these two are going to interact together to bring about NPD. When we speak about narcissism now, which is a personality trait, it tends to be situational. So you could have someone that's a sports star or a music star, and they're surrounded by people that say yes to the person's every whim. That then begins to bring about this sense of narcissism, where there's lack of empathy, there's arrogance, there's the belief that the person is special. So briefly put, narcissism, we tend to see that coming about in a person that's already grown up. In NPD, seeds are planted in childhood and they begin to emerge in your teenage years as well as your early 20s.
So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, when Doctor was talking about narcissism, us as grown-ups that adopt this, let's call it certain traits in a certain situation or circumstance, he was actually using his hands as if it's effervescent, as if it's something that's bubbling. And for a moment there, I thought, such confidence. Are we not confusing confidence with narcissistic traits? Is there an overlap?
Childhood is a period where the children learn about feelings, about thinking, about behavior, about how to interact with the general world. And your parent that has got a healthy way of being is going to impart all of those lessons. If there's success, it's going to be celebrated. If there's a failure that's been there, the child is going to be comforted. When we speak about this overbearing, closeted type of parenting, failures are not going to be acknowledged, but the child will be encouraged or congratulated, even though there's nothing there to be encouraged or to be congratulated. If the kiddie has done something wrong, like taking a cookie without asking for it and being found, and when the kiddie is confronted about that and the kiddie lies, kiddie is not called out, but that is encouraged. It is those things that plant the seeds of NPD. In other words, the form of parenting that shields kiddies from consequences of their actions, from being overly praised, even though it's not needed or not warranted or not necessary. Those are the things that plant the seeds of possible NPD as the kiddie grows. Because they'll grow up with the sense that I can take without having to pay
There's
for
no
it.
repercussions.
There are no repercussions. I can do X, Y, Z.
I'm always right.
I'm always right. Quite right. Quite
Even
right.
with adults.
That's what we see. That's what we see. But as I mentioned, at the risk of sounding like a broken record,
No, I'm loving it.
Narcissism,
Right.
personality trait can be switched on and off. NPD, that is a personality disorder, causes distress, can't be switched on and off, can't be modulated.
No magical cure. No
No
pull.
magical cure, no pure, just psychotherapy.
Can this disorder be passed on from generation to generation?
So yes, there is evidence that shows that NPD can be transmitted or passed down families. And that's for two reasons. Firstly, the genetic component, as we mentioned earlier, that there's this interaction between a person's genetics and their environment. The second risk factor that predisposes that happening in families is that if you've got parents or a parent that has got NPD, they are more likely to replicate the conditions to bring about NPD in their own little kiddies. So yes, the risks are quite high of a kiddie having it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that a kiddie who comes from a home where there's one or two parents with NPD, or the kiddie does have the genes for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that child is going to grow up to develop narcissistic personality disorder.
So if the gene exists, and if your parents both display this disorder of narcissistic personality disorder, it still doesn't mean that I will be the narcissist with the disorder.
Not in the least. Not in the least. What can happen, and I think maybe this then goes to what we can do for kiddies or teenagers that are in such families. If there is a family member or an adult or a parental figure who is able to display to the kiddie healthy ways of thinking, healthy ways of experiencing emotions, healthy ways of interacting with people socially, then that is going to be a positive influence or a healthier influence in the development of that kiddie. Yeah.
Do we say certain types of people get NPD?
The short answer is anyone can develop NPD as long as we have this interplay that we've spoken about between genetics and the external environment. Anyone can get it.
What if you have narcissistic traits and you want to show up differently? I don't want to change, but I'm willing to try.
So that's always a very good sign. If a person has got narcissism or those types of traits and they feel that they want to change, then that means that the person has got insight into what's going on within their brain or their mind. They've got insight into how their behavior impacts those around them. And that's always a very good sign. And that's one thing that you can use as a therapist to build up on in the therapy space. So it would be an excellent sign for a person to say, I feel that I need to work on X, Y, Z. It would be a very good sign.
How do we help anyone that comes from a home where there was a parent with narcissistic personality disorder?
I think that's such a beautiful question. May I use the analogy of a breast lump, please? I know it's a morbid example, but let's go with it, please. So let's say you're taking a shower, you're in the bath,
Right.
and you feel a lump where a lump shouldn't be. You will not waste time. You will immediately go seek out medical help. The same principle applies to a person that is coming from a background where there's a parent or parents that either had narcissism or NPD. We say to that person, go and seek out professional help. Why is that so important? Parents are, for lack of a better word, authors on the blank slate that is that person's personality. If the author is not the healthiest, the product is not going to be the healthiest either. And so it's going to take a professional, mental health professional, psychologist, psychiatrist, to help point out that this is what has happened to you. This is the name that we give to what you're experiencing. And this is what we need to do to help you work on it or to fix it. So first step, seek out professional help. The second step, which can be difficult for people, is to acknowledge and to accept that it has happened to you. In other words, you have discovered your parents or the parental figure, and you have discovered that your parent might not be the healthiest in terms of their personality structure. To accept does not imply weakness. It doesn't imply that we're saying it is okay that it happened to you. Doesn't imply that at all. It basically means that you acknowledge, as painful as it might be, that my parent was not the healthiest, and as a result, this is the impact that it has had on me. The last one, and equally important, on top of seeking professional help, on top of acknowledging and accepting that it has happened, boundaries. You have to set boundaries and to set them consistently. And for some, unfortunately, if the parent or the parental figure has no insight, consistently ignores the person's boundaries, sometimes setting boundaries can mean having to put some distance
Time
between
apart.
you and the other person. To care doesn't mean proximity. It doesn't mean that at all. You can still care for a person. You can still provide for them in whatever way, but at a certain distance, because we need to protect your mental health. So those are the three ways that we can help a person that comes from such a background.
The same, Doctor, what do you do if you married a partner, a person? You thought your husband was confident or your wife was confident, and you realize that this is actually, I'm stuck. I'm in a relationship with someone with narcissistic traits, or I'm in a relationship. There's been a diagnosis. They've seen a professional, a healthcare professional. My partner, my husband, my person has got narcissistic personality disorder. How do we set distance apart from that?
It will have to start off again with acknowledging that this is the person that I married. It will have to include boundaries, but part and parcel of setting boundaries includes open, honest, unambiguous, non-threatening communication. In other words, you'll have to have a moment where you sit down with your person and you say, when you do this, this is how I feel. In other words, you have to center you in that conversation so as to avoid this possibly escalating into an argument.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, because this is really important. This is not while there's a fight happening. This is, you said you sit down with partner and I'm grounded. So I'm sure I'm calm. It's the right time and we sit down with partner. Okay.
That's right.
I'm in it. So what do we do next?
Quite right. So have that conversation with your partner. Have that conversation and speak about how they make you feel when they maybe ignore your feelings or invalidate you or ignore your boundaries. You have to have that conversation. Part of the work that will have to be done is for you to understand that this is the type of person that I've married, or this is the person's personality structure that I'm living with, and having to make a decision about what that relationship will look like going forward. Boundaries, communication, setting boundaries again, and I'm repeating that on purpose. Those are extremely important, absolutely important. and equally important would be to take care of yourself as well. In other words, to take care of your own health and your own mental health as well. This is what you can do in such an environment.
Is mediation important? If you know that there's narcissism present in a relationship, do you get a psychologist to intervene? Is it a level where a social worker has to get involved? Where do we go?
So family therapy is going to be beneficial. You could go with a social worker, you could go with either a clinical psychologist or counseling psychologist. You can go with either one of these professionals. What is absolutely essential is that the party that has got either narcissism or they've got NPD, they must be invested in that process. With narcissism, as we've discussed, that can switch on and off. It can be modulated. Insight most likely will be there. The person with NPD, it might be a bit tricky because the way their personality structure is that they feel or may feel that there's nothing wrong with them. They may feel that, oh, these people are just jealous. They don't get me. I'm so unique. I'm so special. So that might be a hurdle in the family therapy. The person with NPD might even try to dominate the therapist because they feel that they're superior to them.
Right.
And that might disrupt the therapeutic process.
Right.
Can it be done? Yes, it can. But there must be insight on the side of the person with narcissism or NPD.
This must be very terrible for families. This must be really hard in relationship. What's one of the first steps when someone realizes that they might be suffering from NPD or that there's narcissistic traits that I know that I can rise above, or partner or person that I'm sharing a life with has got this?
Professional help, professional help, professional help. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough. There must be professional help. I will go back to the analogy of the breast lump that I gave. There's a lump where no lump should be, and you immediately seek out help because you are aware that if you don't attend to this lump, it's going to grow, it's going to cause problems, might even bring about your death. Likewise, when we come to a loved one who may or will have an adverse impact on your own mental health, you have to address it. If you don't, the risks of you developing unhealthy ways of thinking, unhealthy coping mechanisms, mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, a low self-esteem, those are definitely going to come in if you don't seek the professional help. So professional help is an absolute must when it comes to being in a relationship with someone with NPD.
What are the dangers in relationship when you are in disagreement with partner, parent, there's children in the house, and you label someone as a narcissist?
So let's speak about ground rules first. Ground rules relating to arguments, ground rules relating to fights, ground rules relating to ordinary conversations or disagreements.
Sure.
Quite right. We usually ask people to try run away from labels, blaming, not taking accountability, making threats, forms of manipulation. This could be emotional or otherwise. We ask that people run away from those. And the reason that we ask that people don't do those things is that when you levy these against a recipient or the person that you're speaking to, most likely their defense mechanisms are going to go up and that conversation is not going to go anywhere. In moments where you're having a conversation with someone with NPD, and despite your best efforts to, unambiguously speak to this person about how they're making you feel or your experience of them, and you can see that this conversation is not going anywhere, as painful as it might be or as difficult as it might be, you need to accept and to acknowledge that this is a personality structure that is in the person that you love. And you need to then, at that point, make the decision to, again, seek professional help, set your boundaries, most importantly, put you first. If this means that you need to put some distance between you and the other party, that might be what you have to do for you. For you.
If this is so serious, why do we throw the term narcissism around like that?
As you know, stigma is informed by not understanding a certain phenomena or not knowing a lot about it. And unfortunately, when it comes to mental health and mental illness and mental health conditions, we tend to throw those labels around loosely. Some of these conditions can be quite painful. They can be quite difficult. And I think it doesn't help anyone, for that matter, just to throw words around. What we ask people to do, and what I would ask, your audience to do that are listening to this podcast, would be, after listening to this podcast, to go then and to look on the internet. There are some good resources that are out there that people can access. As a rule of thumb, try to look for a website that has been written by a clinician. So look for MD maybe behind the title of the author. Then you know that it's been written by a medical professional. Right. Or you can go to some private hospital groups' websites in South Africa. Some are really, really good. Or SADAG, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. They've got a really good website. So people do need to educate themselves. And if you'll allow me, please, if you think back to when HIV first burst on the scene, if you remember all of these campaigns and promotions and teaching people about HIV, how that then slowly took away the stigma, I think we need to do the same thing for mental health. We need to have people learning. We need to have people educating themselves. And equally important, we need to have those mental health promotions to further get rid of the stigma.
What are some of the do's and don'ts? What do we do in the presence of the narcissist and what don't we? At the dinner table, if one of our family members displays traits of a narcissist or they have got the disorder, what are some of the things that we do and say, and how do we show up? In layman's terms, how do we not disrupt this entire meal that we've all waited for?
Okay. Let's disrupt some social norms with the answer to that question. When we speak about selfishness, it is something that is negative that we don't want.
Right.
What I sometimes speak to my patients about is that maybe we need to reconfigure what we understand selfishness to be. So you could have good selfishness and bad selfishness. The bad selfishness is when it is cold outside, it's the peak of the Highveld winter. I've got 20 really thick jackets, you don't have one, and you come and you ask if, I could give you or let you use one of my jackets. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. That's bad selfish. We don't want that. Right. But then we also have what I call good selfish, where you learn to put you first.
Right.
And in the putting you first, it's not saying that you're excluding others, but you are rather saying your health, your mental health is very important, and you need to do whatever you need to do to protect it and to take care of it. Because when your mental health gets a knock, it can be a bit difficult to get back to a healthier state.
Yeah.
So how can you do it? Let's say you're at a family dinner. I think let's use that environment. And someone says something at the dinner table that makes you feel that maybe there might be some narcissism here. Or maybe you've done some reading and you strongly feel that maybe one of the relatives might have NPD. All you can do there is A, set boundaries. So, Dr. Matsebula, I'm not going to accept it if you speak like that to us at the table. It is not healthy. This is a family environment. May we eat in peace. You set those boundaries.
Right.
Okay? The recipient of that message may or may not adhere to those, but you have to do so. And you need to set boundaries consistently.
Right.
If those boundaries are not being respected, and this then falls into the realm of the description of what love is. So when we speak about love, the person respects your feelings, they put you first, they respect your boundaries. If they can't do that, or they will not do that, then you may need to actually open some space between you and them. So you'll notice that the answer to your question actually doesn't even involve the person that's got the narcissism or the NPD, but it's all on you. Why is that important? It is not your fault as the recipient of whatever you might have received from the person with narcissism or NPD. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. But what is your responsibility is to take care of your mental health. So you need to put you first. You need to communicate in a clear manner. And you need to set those boundaries and to set them consistently. That's the best that you can do. Over and above, as we've mentioned, educating yourself and getting professional help. That's the best you can do.
Do we follow the online reading that talks about how to understand the narcissist better? Do we communicate with them in a different way if it's your partner or you have children together, you know? So do we, while this process is underway, we've sought help from a mediator, the medical professional is involved. Do we communicate in a different way while we wait?
Your communication must be clear. It must be unambiguous. It must center you. In other words, I, Dr. Matsebula, feel XYZ when you do that to me. That is what must be there. And then in terms of the kiddie that's growing up, you have to model to that kiddie healthier ways of thinking, healthier ways of feeling, healthier ways of interacting socially with people. That is, again, the absolute best that you can do. If the person with NPD does have some insight, and they tend to struggle on that front, admittedly, if they do have some insight, then there is some work that can be done, and there they can be assisted by a healthcare professional. If they don't have that insight, or despite efforts to have them go to therapy, and you can see that things are not working out there, then you need to take care of you. Then you need to make a decision that is going to be healthier for you and the kiddie. And this can take different forms. It could be removing yourself physically. Sometimes that is an option. If it's not an option, ensuring that you set those boundaries, you take care of yourself, you get therapy so that you're able to balance out whatever you receive from the person with NPD. So the self-care is not being indulgent. It's not a luxury. It's not a nice to have. It is a must have.
It's a must have.
It's a must have.
There's a long journey ahead for some of us, be it our children who we adore, our partners who we adore, our parents who we adore, and then the ultimate, that family gathering with someone who's sitting down, who's suffering from narcissistic personality disorder or have narcissistic traits. As a healthcare professional that works with people every day, managing stress, anxiety, and disorders, please motivate my audience.
Your brain, your mental health is one of the most important aspects of who you are. It is absolutely essential that we take care of our mental health. I think the time for viewing mental health care as a luxury, I think those days are long gone. Now it's an absolute necessity.
Dr. Gagu, thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Matsebula is a psychiatrist. He's in private practice. His details will be on our website on babybrunch.co.za. He is passionate about mental health. They run mental health awareness campaigns, and they really provide a wonderful platform for people to understand and to manage their stress, anxiety, burnout, corporates. Get involved and help us to help our country. Doctor, it has been a true gift to have you here. So thank you so much for joining us on babybrunch.co.za.